Grateful to have you. See people joining every second here. This screen is filling up quick. Thank you for your attendance. We're looking forward to our speaker today. We'll introduce her shortly, but we will begin. Faith Jennings has offered to say a prayer with us to get started, and then immediately after that, Maku has a couple of announcements, it looks like, from IPSO. So Faith, if you would please contribute. Thank you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the opportunity we have to meet together today as students in a department and to listen to what Dr. Martin has prepared. And we ask that Thou would bless us with Thy Spirit that we may be able to learn well and be able to take this knowledge forward into our lives as we seek to contribute to the field of instructional design. And we ask that would be mindful of those who are suffering in the pandemic, that they may be blessed and comforted, and that we may also know how to help those around us. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
All right, just a couple of IPSO announcements really quick. First, immediately after our seminar today, as always, we'll have our post-seminar hangout. And today for our hangout, we are going to be doing a faculty spotlight featuring Dr. Larson. So if you'd like to come and get to learn more about him and his research and who he is, please feel free to stick around after that and join us for that. And then another reminder, about a week ago, I sent out an email letting you know that it was time to nominate and elect a new IPSO president for next year. So if you have someone in mind who you think would be a good president, or if you yourself would like to run for president, please nominate that person or yourself. Like I said, I sent out the form about a week ago, but I will send it out again today as a reminder. But you need to please get your nominations in by tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day to nominate people. So please be sure to do that if you have someone in mind. And then last but not least, go ahead and mark your calendars now, because on Thursday the 25th, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow, we are going to be having a virtual escape room night on Zoom. We're going to be doing that at 7:30. So look for more information forthcoming about that. But yeah, plan on joining us for that as well. And we look forward to seeing you at our events. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Maku. We'll turn the balance of our time now over to our presenter today, Dr. Florence Martin from UNC Charlotte has agreed to spend some time with us this afternoon. Florence, we'll just turn the balance of the time over to you. Students, if you'll join me in welcoming Dr. Martin to our seminar today. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you all the next few minutes. So as I was introduced, I'm at UNC Charlotte. I'm a professor of learning design and technology. And there's the link to my website. So if you're interested in seeing any of my work, publications, so I've linked them all over there. I primarily research in the area of online learning, online teaching and learning. And so, you know, the COVID times has definitely been interesting. It's definitely advanced online learning, right? We've been able to step up and support both practitioners within the university and also outside the university, do workshops. And yeah, who thought that the whole world would be doing online learning? So, but definitely exciting times for an online learning researcher. So that's about me. So we're going to talk about facilitation strategies today. So that's what we're going to focus on for today's presentation. And I heard that we have both master's students and doctoral students. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of research studies, which are like, you know, tied together. But I'm hoping you will take away a lot of application and strategies that you can apply if you design online learning or also teach. Some of you might also be teaching. So if you're instructional designers, aspiring instructional designers, or also, you know, instructors, I think it benefits all of you, or even administrators. So I think it should apply across contexts. So I want to first acknowledge my collaborators on the studies that I'm presenting today. It was co-authored by Dr. Chuang Wang, who's methodologist, and then Dr. Aisha Sadaf, who teaches with me in the program. So it's a 3-member team. So I wanted to acknowledge their work. So before I get into the study, let's take a quick couple of minutes. I'd like to know more about you, and we don't have time to do this, one-on-one introduction. So if you can just type in the chat window for me. Who are you? Like, are you a master's student, doctoral student, if you're a faculty? And I recognize several names and faces already. Or if you do something else, but affiliated with the program, I'd like to, okay, see several. Master's, doctoral, faculty, okay. Good number of, okay, students. Love learning about learning. I like that, Melissa. Okay, master students from New Zealand, okay. And we have an online administrator who's also a doc student, okay, excellent. Okay, it just gives me an idea, who you are. Okay, and while you're doing that, I'm going to go to the next slide. So I was also going to get a sense of what sector you are in. Like, are you K-12? Are you more corporate, higher ed? If you work in currently, you can tell me. You might also be a full-time student. And if there is a sector you want to work in, and also what do you want to work as? So it could be a combination of all that. Okay, I see several K-12, higher ed, banking, continuing ed. Okay, very diverse. User experience specialist at the library. Okay, excellent. Okay. Yeah. So here, the program I'm in, we have 3 concentrations. So we have the school folks, we call them as a school specialists. And then we have the training and development, which is, you could be higher ed or corporate. And then we have a 3rd concentration called online teaching and learning, which we created a few years ago, but that's been popular too. And we do this for the grad cert and for the MED, not for the doctoral, but for the grad cert and MED. Okay, tech integration. Okay, good. Okay, so let's keep moving. Thank you all to those of you who took the time to let me know who you are. And so here is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about facilitation, right? So there is so much of emphasis on design. We spend a lot of time on how to design online learning. UNC Charlotte is big on quality matters, for example. They want courses QM certified. And so where there's so much of emphasis on how to design a course, and sometimes we think once we design, it's like done. It's great, it can be effective, but there's more to it, right? There's a second part of it. So if you're an online instructor, in addition to being a designer, you're also a facilitator. And you're going to be putting in a lot of hours facilitating your online course. So this is where the teaching or the delivery of the instruction happens, the implementation of the online course with the students. And you use various strategies to actively engage the students to facilitate learning. And actually, one thing I didn't ask, if one of you want to type in the chat, is are your classes, do you take online courses? And if you do you do synchronous or asynchronous? That might be interesting to know. Or are most of your classes face-to-face? Okay, or online in department right now. Okay, because of the pandemic. Async, okay, mostly async, okay. Yeah, our master's is more async. But our doctoral, the EDD is more blended here. Okay, that's good to know. So you are all online students or online, or some instructors teach online too. So this is the framework I'm going to be using to talk through some of the strategies. It's an old framework, it's some reviewers and editors complain that it's outdated. It's 1995, but then I think it's still applicable, for the online context. So it's divided into like managerial, pedagogical, social, and technical. So you could be doing facilitation strategies that could be managerial in nature. Some might be pedagogical, some might be social, and some might be technical. So what I did was, it was more a reflection, like, from practice. I kind of came up with a list of strategies that I use as an online instructor. And, these are not really mutually exclusive. Some of them could fit in multiple categories, but then I tried to like put them in one because we also wanted to validate the instrument. So I picked, so what are some facilitation strategies that would bring a social element to the course? So there was a video-based instructor introduction. Instructors do an introduction, right? A lot of times it might be a text introduction, but then, you could also do a video-based introduction, which is what I do. I use VoiceThread to introduce myself. And then in the discussion forum, again, different types of discussion facilitation can happen, but it's important for the instructor to be present to some extent, right? I usually have graduate students co-facilitate with me. I have them sign up and co-facilitate, but then the instructor being present in the discussion forum is a strategy. Able to contact the instructor in multiple ways, especially when you're in an async environment, that if you're in an entirely, online program, you don't see your peers or your instructors in person, so that knowing that you can reach out to your instructor anytime and using different methods. So that was a strategy that I included. So for example, I have contact the instructor forum, if for general questions, or email or phone or office hours via Zoom. So, just all those different things that you could do could be a facilitation strategy. Managerial, doing a video-based course orientation at the beginning, it saves you a ton of time later on if you clarify, set expectations early on. So that could be a facilitation strategy. Timely response to questions is an important one. So, and this is one that QM recommends too. So in your syllabus, including how quickly will students hear from me, right? So usually I say 24 to 48 hours, and it varies instructor to instructor. You decide what is best for you. And sometimes students ask, does that include the weekends? So, whatever works best for you. So setting that early on and then following through when the delivery of the course. So then students don't expect to hear from you right away, but then they know that, they'll still hear from you soon. And this is real person who's the instructor who's going to respond to me. Weekly announcements, sending one periodically. I do every week, actually. However you structure your course, maybe even multiple in a week, so they know that every Monday morning in my class, they'll hear from me. So for some pedagogical, timely feedback is one that I included. In an online class, especially async, they're relying on the instructor feedback a lot, because there's no real-time discussion happening. So whether it's assignments, projects, discussions, so that timeliness is very, very critical. Again, this is another one that QM recommends, and I say 7 days, that's my practice, I say. And as an instructor, it's helpful to me because if I don't grade that week, it piles up the next week. Right? So I'm the one who's going to be overwhelmed. So having that practice is actually, it's been helpful. And feedback using various modalities. It always doesn't have to be only text-based. We rely on grading rubrics and criterias, but then sometimes we could use the functionality. What LMS do you all use there? Can someone tell me in the chat? So we are with Canvas too. And, so you could quickly, within grading, you could quickly record, and you could also send feedback. So those options are available. I make students reflect at the end of every few modules, even though students are not usually excited about it. But it's good to see, for me to know as an online instructor, what are they getting out of this, right? I ask them what benefited you, what challenged you, and then I ask a transfer question. How do you see yourself applying what you learned in your current or future, position? And so then I go back and I respond to each of them. So that's another strategy that I use for facilitation. And so that shows again, the instructor is reading what I'm I'm submitting. So finally, some technical elements, synchronous sessions can be used, right? So like a blend of async and sync. If you've not heard the term yet, I wrote an EDUCAUSE piece on bicronous online learning. We have blended to combine face-to-face and online, but technically we didn't have a term to combine async and sync, and which might be a modality that works for some folks, even if it is mostly, and you could decide the percentage of blend. So for example, if you're embedding some sync sessions in your online courses and using different functionality to facilitate, like polling or, like text chatting, engaging your learners, breakout rooms, so all that goes there. And then I included one called interactive visual syllabi. I've read about the visual syllabi, creating a more engaging syllabi, because syllabi can be boring, right? Who wants to read those like 20 pages? So it included that. And then finally, the last one is, this is one of my favorite. Every time I create a module, I like to include some instructor generated recordings. I keep them short, 15 minutes. I call them as e-lessons. So short videos or multimedia. Sometimes, even if I don't, then I have a guest speaker recording. But having some kind of like an instructor created material, again, helps with the facilitation. So again, they know that they are listening, hearing from you, and it's just not readings and other resources out there. Okay, now that I've set the stage, so here are 12 different facilitation strategies I included. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's more that can be added. And somebody who wants to extend this work, you could put together a longer list, and you could also research on it. So what I did again was, using those 12 strategies, I looked at these 4 variables as the dependent variables. So like, what's the impact of these strategies? It was not an experimental study, but then, it was a survey-based study. So how do these strategies impact instructor presence, instructor connection, engagement, and learning? So we looked at like 4 outcomes. So just not only engagement in learning, because we knew that, instructors, like facilitation strategies has an impact. Does it have an impact on instructor presence and instructor connection? Do the students or the instructors think that they're able to build the connection with their instructor? And also, of course, end goal is you want them to be engaged and learn from it, right? So those were the constructs that we used. And I have quick definitions on like, what each of these mean. So instructor presence is, actions and behaviors of the instructor who projects the instructor as a real person, right? And it occurs when instructors are actively involved in facilitation. And then instructor connection is, again, behaviors that reduce the distance between, the instructor and the student. And there's a closeness between the instructor and the student, which is demonstrated in instructor connectedness. And engagement, which you're all familiar with, is the ability to hold the attention of an individual or to induce the individual to participate in some kind of activity. So especially this is very, very critical in an online setting, right? Because if the students are engaged, you're going to lose them. They're just not going to be as active in the course. And finally, learning is acquisition of knowledge or skills through the experience, study, or being taught. So we included that as one of the constructs as well. So, and there is research, that has studied all these variables, and you can see how the instructor presence has responsiveness and message, that has impacted students' perception of presence. And then humanizing the online learning environment, that increases students' comfort level. So that is important. And then email correspondence between instructor and learner, and how that accounted for perceptions of instructor presence is being studied. And again, there's the last one that was in 2010. And again, they found that the most valued indicators of instructor presence are important to students in online courses, where making course requirements clear, being responsive to students' needs, and the timeliness of information and instructor feedback. So we built on the existing research, but we thought there's still a need to do a little bit more on facilitation, right? That's why we decided to do the study. So there were 2 studies that came out of it. So every time when I do a survey-based study, I try to at least look at it from the student's perspective, and then also from the instructor's perspective. I'm trying to keep track of the time. So the first one was a student perception study, and that article was published in Internet and Higher Ed. And the second one was an instructor perception study of facilitation strategies. And it was the same list, the same strategies, the same construct. We just asked both groups. The second article was published in Online Learning. So if you want to read, and I have the references if you want to look at. So what I'm going to do is quickly walk you through both so that you can have some takeaways. So this is the first one. So this was in 2018, so not too long ago, just a couple of years ago. So student perception of, and what we decided to do for the scale is we asked about helpfulness. Which of these strategies are helpful? We didn't ask if it is important or if you use them, but we asked it on a scale of helpfulness. Again, it doesn't mean the other scales could not be used, right? This is one, you have to decide which one you want to focus on. And so we decided to use the scale of helpfulness. So we got responses from about 188 graduate students who were taking courses in fall 2016. And there were 126 female and 60 male. So there's the age of the participants 17 to 70 with a mean of 34. And the number of online courses and the participants ranged from 0 to 35. There was one student who had, there was that very high number, so we don't know how that came out. And then, so again, the instrument, it was the 12 Likert scale items. Again, as I showed you all the 12 strategies, each of it was an item. And then, so I did like a matrix model, the strategies, and for the 4 different the construct. So did this facilitation strategy. So that's exactly how it was worded. The following facilitation strategy helped me feel that my instructor was present. It helped me to get me to know my instructor. It helped me stay engaged, and it helped me in my learning of the content. We used that 5-point, but it was on a scale of helpfulness. So again, Cronbach's alpha was pretty good. So pretty reliable, it was about 0.90. And we did descriptives and we did a validation. I'm not going to get into that today, but we did validate the first time we collected data. And then we also did some inferential statistics, so in survey based, we did some demographic comparisons. So I'll show you, and then we did some correlations too. So what did we find? So before I don't know if any of you have read this, let me see, what do you think students would have told was more important among the 12? Let's see how much you remember of the 12 strategies. Okay, timely feedback. Steve says timely feedback. What else might be important to students? Anybody else? Okay, engagement, okay. Strategies, clear expectations, multiple ways of connecting, okay. The multimedia e-lesson, okay. Personal replies to reflection, Marianne says, okay. Okay, video-based instruction, Krista says, okay, good, okay, that's good. So at least those are things that you value, right? As a student, if you're a student, then you probably value, or if you're a faculty, you probably think that students value that. Okay, so overall, what happened was, it was, most of the facilitation strategies were rated high. And in a lot of the survey-based research in EdTech, this is a challenge we face, right? A lot of time it's heavily skewed because it has to be really a strategy that does not work for them to really rate it low. So the mean score of all the facilitation strategies was 4.10. Okay, so overall, so that was like a good place to be in. But then for the constructs, it's ranged from 3.75 to 4.65. So at least I'll show you what was really rated high and then what were like in the 3s, okay, not as high. So we're still talking about the students from the student perspective. So look at this one. So there's a 4.65. Students must really value that. Instructors' timely response to questions. So that shows that, they think that is very, very important. If they have a question, they want to hear from the instructor. And we had given like example within 24 to 48 hours. So that was high. And then you see some 3s here, 3.98, so some, they rated that it helps, for example, the video-based introduction helps for instructor presence and instructor connection, but not so much for engagement and learning. So that was interesting to see, they valued it for certain constructs, but not for, for learning, it didn't matter to them. So those 4 were like in the 3s over there. Let me show you another one. So this was the second highest, 4.45. So whoever said, I think it was Steve, right? Timely feedback on assignments. So students definitely valued that. So if you are a designer, or if you are an instructor, or if you're a student who's aspiring to be an instructor and designer, so these are very important strategies to be using. So 4.45, and these are like, not that some of these are not important, 4.30 are all still pretty high, but I just picked a couple to talk about. And then look at these last 2. This was interesting, especially the last one. They didn't care about the visual syllabi. I've seen studies done just on syllabi, how to create engaging syllabi. Students didn't care about it. I think all that mattered to them was the information, or at least, it was in the 3s. I shouldn't say they didn't care about it. It was not as helpful. Okay. And then synchronous session didn't go up above 4. And this was one, and I've done a few studies on including some synchronous elements, and there's always mixed feelings on that. So if you're in an async program, truly async without synchronous element, you sign up for that because you don't want to set aside that synchronous time. So that could be one reason, but also in this, we asked about the different features, whether that would help them. So it could be a combination. Maybe, some of these students are in an async program, so it really didn't matter to them. And some of them, it didn't matter whether the instructor, even if the instructor was doing synchronous sessions and they were using different features. So one thing we didn't ask, which I wish we had, is like the modality, and then trying to analyze facilitation strategies by async or sync, and trying to differentiate that. The thing is, even if you have synchronous sessions, some of these other async strategies still work for you, right? But then if you are in a truly synchronous type of a program, your instructor is not doing much async and only sync, then some strategies may not work for you. So that is something we did not think through in this study. There's definitely a need, to look at it from that. Or if you're in a bicronous format where both aspects are important, and then you might be using some facilitation strategies that work in async and some in sync. Okay. So again, a quick recap of the results. Again, timely response to questions and timely feedback was the most important for instructor presence. Lowest rated for instructor presence was, again, the sync, what I mentioned, and the visual syllabi. For connection, they liked the video-based instruction and also the instructor's response to student reflections. So someone had mentioned that, right? So that came up for connection. And again, the visual syllabi and the sync, pretty much, I think for 3 out of 4, it was the lowest. Engagement, again, timely response to questions and timely feedback was the highest. They liked the video-based course orientation, and sorry, actually they did. This was the lowest. Sorry, this was the lowest. Course orientation was the lowest, and the visual syllabi was the lowest for the engagement. They didn't think that engaged them, even though, in other aspects it was rated high. So for learning, again, timely response to questions and timely feedback. I think all 4, I think those came pretty high. And lowest rated was, again, video-based introduction and the interactive visual syllabi. So you see a pattern, right? Among all 4 constructs. So we also did some analysis by demographics. Let me actually take you to the next slide where I have the results. We did a MANOVA, and then, we didn't find any difference based on gender or discipline of these students and facilitation strategies. But here is what we found. We found some difference based on their educational level. So what undergraduate students valued was different from postdoctoral and other postgraduate students, which was coded as other. So I think it was for engagement and learning and connection, we found a difference. So undergraduate students rated significantly lower on engagement and learning in comparison to postdoctoral and other postgraduate students. And actually, I think I had a typo early on when I said this was who this was sent to. This was sent to all types of online learners. It was not only graduate students. It was to all different, levels of students. What we did was we tried to reach program directors and then have them send it to their students. That's the model we used, because recruiting students from different institutions for a survey research is always challenging. So that's the model that we used in the study. We also had open-ended items, and the top two, at least I'll mention, synchronous meetings was listed as helpful. So this is one where we had mixed findings. Remember, it was rated low in the quantitative aspect, or it was in the threes, but then some students, like, Val said that was very helpful. And then, yeah, they also said additional resources and examples when instructor shares that, that's a helpful facilitation strategy. And then moderated discussion they valued, and then they also expected, clear expectations was important to them as a facilitation strategy. Least helpful, group work was least helpful, they thought. And we all know collaboration is challenging in online, right? But here's the other thing. Discussion also, students have mixed perception. While some of them value the discussion, some of them think forced discussion is not helpful. So that's another one, there is still some mixed findings. So discussion, again, definitely think about timely response and then feedback in online facilitation. Video introduction was helpful to build a connection, but not for engagement or learning. Instructors' response to student reflection was rated the highest for instructor connection. So students do like when they hear from the instructor. Synchronous connection was not found helpful for instructor presence and instructor connection. But however, we saw in the open-ended, right, that some students did value it. Syllabi was rated the lowest as all four of the constructs. So, and age really did not make a difference, age or gender, but then, the level of the student. So maybe what strategies work for undergraduate students might be different for postgraduate students. So these are things that came up in the open-ended comments that I showed you, providing additional resources and examples, setting clear expectations, moderated discussions, narrated PowerPoints, not the last two, just the top four. I didn't have specific items on these, but they pointed out, they said those were something they liked. Narrated PowerPoints was similar to what I included as e-lessons, but they called out, just said narrated PowerPoints they liked. And then creating videos and synchronous meetings was not as valued. So I am quickly going to show you there are limitations always, right? It's self-reported. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. And a lot of these were students in the US. So we don't know how generalizable this is for a global audience. And the response rate was low. I don't recall exactly, but then it was pretty low. So, those who really wanted to take the time only would have responded. So you miss out on all the others. So this second one, I'm not going to go as detailed because you already know, how I had structured the previous one. So we asked the same questions to the instructors, right? We asked the same, actually, let me see if there are any questions. Size of classes. Okay, Stephanie says size of, that's an interesting, good one. Yeah, we didn't look at that. Definitely, along with the modality, size of classes would have mattered too, because I hear, even on my campus, hear about instructors who teach online classes with 150 to 200 students. So I don't know how they do it, because I complain like when it goes to like 25. So especially when you teach at the graduate level, right? So that might make a difference. Any other questions before we move on to the instructor perception? What else? How can you build on this? Are there other things that might have been interesting to look at, to include? And that might be a dissertation or a project for one of you.
I thought it was
some of, oh, sorry, Stephanie.
go ahead, Melissa, that's fine.
Just maybe some of the students, did you look at their past experience with online learning? Was this their first online class, or had they been used to online, were all their classes online, and graduate versus undergraduate, differences there?
We did collect the data, but I don't know whether we ran that analysis or we may not have found anything, I think. But that's an important one to look at too. So I agree. Prior experience could matter, right?
I thought it was interesting, your result, that they didn't really desire synchronous instruction. And it made me wonder as to the motivations for the reasons why they were taking online classes in the first place. Was it because they were wanting the flexibility that online classes give them, and that synchronous didn't meet that need?
Yeah, very possible, very possible. So maybe they work full time and, you know, they don't want to commit to that evening, like especially if it's a graduate course in the evening. Yeah. Faith says, yeah, seeing first generation or non-traditional students. Yeah, that might be interesting to find out, especially, you know, to see what their needs are and what type of facilitation strategies work for them. Okay. Okay. You can definitely do more inferential. So, you know, that's one way when you do survey-based research, you know, there's a lot of descriptive in there, but then you, with these demographics, you can build on some inferential analysis, right? To make it more meaningful for the audience. COVID too, yeah, different now with other factors such as COVID. Yeah. Okay, so what do you think the instructors thought? Like, do you think they rated these strategies as high as their students? And if so, like, you know, what strategies do you think the instructors might have said is helpful for the students? So that's for the instructor, lots of videos, okay. Clear course requirements, okay. Instructors like discussions, okay. Feedback, okay, okay. Steve is staying with timely feedback. Even though it's hard on the instructors, you know, the timely grading is challenging, yes, but it's important. Timeliness, yes, Cecil says timeliness. Okay, clear expectations and schedule, okay. Okay, let's look. Let's see what did the instructors think. I didn't do like a direct comparison, but then, you know, you can still see. We got about 100 responses. Getting instructor responses was hard too. These days, you know, getting any survey responses is just challenging. So we use the same format. Okay, there, directly. The top two were the lowest. So instructors, I mean, they are all in the threes. I mean, one of the lowest, I shouldn't say the lowest. They didn't think like introduction and the video based was as, you know, helpful. So those were in the threes. But here are some threes too. This 3 is for weekly announcement. They didn't think it was as helpful for instructor connection, but it was helpful for instructor presence. And engagement and learning were in the 3s. And then this last row, you see 3 3s, you know, videos for the person who picked said videos. So it was in the 3s. They said instructor presence was a 3.94, connection was a 3.02, engagement was a 3.91. But overall, if you look, we see more 3s here than what we saw in the student side, right? I think students had more 4s compared to the instructors. Visual syllabi was in the 2s. So they really, you know, they were in agreement with the students. And feedback, of course, yeah, they did value. So you can see the 3.5, 3.3, 3 points. Oh, this is the modality feedback was in the 3s, not in the 4s. Somebody had picked feedback. The timeliness, timely feedback is in the 4s. Timely feedback was in the 4s all way through. And so actually in the previous slide, the timely response was also in the 4s. So those are the 2 we saw very high in the other one, right? So here are some open-ended. Again, we see some mixed findings. Helpful, instructors thought that group projects are helpful. We saw that this was said least helpful by the students. Synchronous session, some instructors thought was helpful. Some instructors thought it was not helpful. Discussion forum, instructors thought it was not as helpful here. Again, group projects too, you see some mixed, you know. So I think, so this leads us to think again, the modality, like, whether the level they're teaching, the modality that they're teaching, class size they are teaching. If you have such a large class size, maybe group projects might be challenging, or discussion boards may be challenging. Maybe you think about different strategies. So I think maybe that's one reason why we see different or mixed findings. And we didn't get into that, so we didn't analyze it based on that. And even if it has to be qualitative, getting more into knowing more about their teaching setting and see what strategies work in that particular setting might have been helpful. Feedback was valued, right, to enhance communication. And some instructors thought students should take active role in leading discussions and in presenting projects. Consistent course structure they talked about, even though it was more design focused, they mentioned that. Personal interaction, instructors valued that. This was interesting. Some instructors said announcements was not as valued. Exams and quizzes. Some instructors didn't think that was as helpful. Some instructors didn't think personal interactions were helpful. So interaction also you see on both sides. So you see instructors all across the spectrum. Some value some strategy, whereas some don't. Okay. And I don't know how helpful that is, right, for us to know. So I think that shows there is a need to dig a little bit more deeper. Why do they value that? There must be a reason, right? So overall, some takeaways, timely response to questions and feedback is helpful. They definitely were in agreement with the students. Group work, even though, there were some mixed findings. They rated group projects as a helpful facilitation strategy. Synchronous session, we don't know whether it's helpful or not for all of them, because we saw again mixed finding there. Visual syllabi was least helpful. And in this case, in demographics, in the student side, we did not find a difference in gender, right? Here we found that female instructors rated facilitation strategies higher than male instructors. So we found something, with gender here. So again, a quick comparison. Again, nothing statistical, but then, those two definitely came up high on both ends: timely response to questions and timely feedback. So because, when an instructor responds promptly, it establishes that immediacy and reduces the isolation for the online student. So that could be an important thing. Okay, so we are at 2:42, and here are a few implications to take away. If you are an instructor, use a variety of facilitation strategies. All 12 may not work for you, but pick and choose what's the best. Set aside time for facilitation. This is something instructors struggle with. When you teach online, it's not like, you have blocked time, especially async online, right? Going into a class. So that setting aside that time for facilitation is very important. And policies for facilitation also might be helpful. And having that in the syllabus, and I talked about how the response times are important for students to know. So those might be helpful for instructors to think through early on. Administrators, including facilitation and teaching evaluation in addition to design. A lot of times we focus heavily, especially in online courses, we focus on the design, but then also seeing how they facilitated, right, is equally important. So for peer observations and things like that, I think facilitation should be emphasized too. And again, having policies on online teaching to have specifics on facilitation requirements, because a quality online course does not stop with just design. Design is very, very important, but then the facilitation is very important too. And for instructional designers, those of you who support instructors or who will be supporting instructors, these are some recommendations that you could include when instructors are designing online courses later on. So there are some of the references I used. I did not really get into the literature, we didn't have a whole lot of time, because I had to decide, should I just show you one study or show you both? And I decided to bring both to give you the picture between both of them. But we have a few minutes. I hear that you end at 2:50, right? So we have about 6 minutes. So I'll be glad to answer any questions specific to this study or in general about online learning. If it's anything that I know about, I'll be glad to talk about. There you go, Dr. Graham as a recommendation. And that's a great suggestion, right? It could be the instructor too, how they are implementing it. And, you know, I hate to say it, for every course that is well designed, there are so many courses that are not as well designed and facilitated. So students could have positive learning experiences as well as not so positive learning experiences. So that might be it too. So Karen, when you asked about gender difference, you were asking about the instructor. Yes, the female instructors had rated facilitation strategies overall as helpful. Where is this taking me? I don't know. I did 2 studies and that I thought that was it. So I'm not extending, but it's being used, folks are using it. There is potential to build on it. I've done workshops and presentations. I did one yesterday for our Center for Teaching and Learning. There is definitely a need, to build on it, especially with so much of still mixed findings, right? Maybe sometime down the line. Yeah, discipline too. On the student side, we really didn't find any significance. We did analyze it based on discipline, but that's an important one too. Some might be very context specific. Yeah. Yes, group work to collaboration too. It depends on how well it is set up, right? So this is a very high level study, right? There could be a study, actually I thought, you could do a study on each of these facilitation strategies, like digging in. So this was like very high level, like giving a list of, here are the things you could do. But to truly know what goes on in each of those, you could like really dig into some of these like things like collaboration and group work, you could definitely dig in. No, I have not really done it. I've not done any, Emily, in response to Emily's question, I've not done any controlled experiments, just like sharing, best practices. That's what I've been doing. So what I did was I've done studies on facilitation strategies and I've done studies on engagement strategies, and engagement strategies can go between design or facilitation, right? You can engage your learners through design too. And the latest one I finished was on design elements. I wanted to call them as design strategies, but that didn't sound quite, so I call them as design elements. So those 2 articles should be coming out this year. It's accepted. And we have rubrics out there for design, but then how many validated instruments do we have for design, a lot of like professional organizations have created, like QM has created, but then they don't want you to include the items in research. So we created a validated instrument based on a number of, rubrics from professional organizations. So that is something I've looked at. I'm trying to look at various aspects of online learning. So. Any other questions in your last few minutes? And if you have any questions down the line, you can always feel free to reach out to me. My email is florence.martin@uncc.edu. Or type my website too.
All right. Thank you so much, Florence, for such an insightful and thought-provoking presentation. Let's give her our usual round of applause, students, for sharing her thoughts with us today. Please take her up on her offer to answer additional questions if anything comes up. Thank you again, Florence. That concludes our seminar for today.